It was a quiet evening when I first noticed something off. I had been married to Richard for over 15 years, and our family had grown close. Despite the complexities, Richard's son, Thomas, had gotten married young and had 2 children, Mia and Ethan. When Richard and I married, I became a grandmother figure to both of them, but it was Ethan, my step-grandson, who had always been particularly close to me. Ethan was a bright, charming young man in his mid-20s, and I had always admired how respectful and kind he was. He often came over to help Richard with the garden or just to chat about his life, his studies, and his future. It was these simple moments that made me feel we had a strong bond. Little did I know, it was a bond that would soon shatter in a most unimaginable way. I had always known there were subtle tensions in the family, particularly between Ethan and his father, Thomas. Their relationship had never been perfect. Thomas had always been a hardworking man, but he never showed Ethan the kind of support or attention he needed growing up. I often stepped in to try and bridge the gap, offering Ethan the guidance I felt he deserved. I thought I had been doing a good job of being a mother figure to him, and I was proud of our closeness. But everything changed one evening when I received a text message. It wasn't from Ethan, but from an unknown number. Curiosity took over, and I opened it. To my shock and horror, the message was addressed to Ethan, but it had been sent to me by mistake. It read, "I can't believe we let it go this far, but I don't regret it. I need you, and I think we should tell everyone soon." My stomach churned as I read the words over and over. The message was from Sophia, my daughter-in-law, the woman I had trusted like a daughter, the one I had welcomed into the family with open arms, the woman who had been a mother to my grandchild, Mia, and who had always seemed so devoted to her marriage with Thomas. And here she was, confessing her involvement with Ethan, my own step-grandson. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I had always suspected that something was off between Sophia and Ethan, but I never imagined it could be an affair. There had been moments when I noticed them too close for comfort, lingering glances, hushed conversations when they thought no one was listening, but I brushed it off as nothing. I never wanted to believe that something so dark and destructive could happen right under my nose. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? Were they using their family gatherings as a cover? How had Ethan, the young man I had mentored and loved like my own, become entangled with Sophia, who was practically a daughter to me? The guilt gnawed at me. Had I failed him in some way? Had I missed the signs? I couldn't bring myself to tell Richard just yet. I needed to process this. I needed to understand what had happened. But every time I saw Ethan, every time I looked at Sophia, I felt a deep sense of betrayal and confusion. How could they have done this to me, to our family? Days passed in a blur. I watched them both closely, trying to decipher their behavior. Ethan seemed distant, his usual warmth replaced by a coldness I hadn't seen before. Sophia, on the other hand, carried on as if nothing had changed. She smiled her usual smile at family dinners, laughed with Richard, and kissed Thomas goodbye when he left for work. But I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the anxiety, the tension in her posture. She was hiding something, and I knew exactly what it was. The day came when I couldn't keep the secret any longer. I had to confront Richard. I had to tell him what I knew, no matter how much it would hurt him. We sat down in the living room, the same room where we had shared so many happy memories over the years. I felt my heart beating faster as I spoke the words aloud. "Richard, I need to tell you something. It's about Ethan and Sophia." He looked up from his book, his face full of concern. "What is it, darling?" And then I told him. I told him everything: the text message, the affair, my suspicions, the lies. I watched as his face drained of color, his hands trembling. Richard was silent for a moment, as if processing the words I had just spoken. It was clear he didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he knew it was true. His son, Ethan, and his wife, Sophia, had betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. For the next few days, Richard was consumed by shock and anger. He couldn't bring himself to confront them directly. He couldn't even look at them without a sense of betrayal clouding his eyes. And I, too, felt the weight of the situation bearing down on me. I had been a part of this family for so long, and yet now I was a stranger in my own home, caught between two people I loved and a truth that seemed impossible to accept. Ethan, sensing the distance, finally came to me. He looked different, older, more worn out. He apologized, but his words felt empty. He told me that he never intended for things to spiral out of control, that he had always admired Sophia, that it had started innocently enough. But the truth was, he was too far gone in the affair to stop. He admitted that he had fallen in love with her, and that he was willing to risk everything for their relationship. I listened, but I couldn't forgive him. I couldn't look at him the same way. The young man I had trusted so deeply, the one I had poured my heart into, had betrayed not only me, but also the man who had raised him. And for what? Love, lust, it didn't matter. The damage was done. Sophia, too, tried to explain herself. She told me that she had felt neglected by Thomas for years, that she and Ethan had developed a connection out of loneliness. She claimed that she never meant to hurt anyone, but the truth was, she had been selfish. She had chosen her own desires over the family she had vowed to cherish. The weeks that followed were full of tension. Richard withdrew into himself, unable to process the betrayal. He stopped talking to Thomas, avoiding family gatherings. Ethan became a ghost, too ashamed to face anyone. And Sophia, well, she tried to act as though nothing had changed, but I could see the cracks in her facade. I never imagined that the person I trusted most, my own stepgrandson, would be capable of such betrayal. The family I had worked so hard to build, the love and trust I thought we shared, had been shattered. I knew that things would never be the same again. Richard and I tried to hold on to what we had, but the wounds were too deep. We were both broken in our own ways. Ethan and Sophia were eventually forced to face the consequences of their actions. Thomas found out about the affair, and he was devastated. It took months of painful conversations and therapy for him to even consider a reconciliation with his wife. But their marriage was never the same. As for Ethan, he left the house, unable to cope with the overwhelming shame of what he had done. As time passed, I realized that the truth had set us all on different paths. Some of us would heal, while others would remain lost. The love we once had for each other would never fully return. But I had to accept that life would go on. I would never forget what happened, but I had to find a way to move forward.